Sometimes it can be hard to predict what is going to be like the next big political problem. Sometimes you can see it a mile off. In many cases, we've been right about that, referring to things like Brexit, the problems at the border, Northern Ireland issue, Northern Ireland Protocol, etc., etc. Very well predicted. But sometimes it's not as easy. For example, the 2017 snap general election. It was predicted to be the Brexit election, but no one could have been further from the truth, because it had nothing to do about Brexit. Brexit barely even featured in that general election. Yes, it was brought up from time to time, but it was by no means the major issue. It was by far at the time pensioners getting their fuel credits. That was the big issue. No one expected that to be the big issue. It became the big issue, but people were still saying it was going to be the Brexit election, even as this thing bloomed up. And of course, after the action, this essentially became what it became about. And people were like, well, no, it wasn't the Brexit election at all. It was about this. But with this potential energy crisis coming up, the groundwork has already been laid. Yesterday in Parliament, even the backbench Tory MPs were shouting at the government to do something about this fuel crisis. Keir Starmer had already been out there saying that this is a potential crisis that the Tories have made for themselves, and they are doing nothing about it. And he's right, they are doing nothing about it, because the Tories are not about long-term solutions. And this is going to be what dominates especially the news, probably for the next couple of months. After this new strain starts to slowly die away, we will get this on a daily basis. This is going to be the big issue, I think, of 2022. So let's go diving into this article then. So, but before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So, there we go. Fancy. So this comes from The Guardian with the title of "The Cost of Living Crisis is Going to Upend British Politics in 2022." Turn on the radio or scroll down your phone and the big headlines belong to COVID. But when this latest version of the plague drops off the front pages, another story is set to take its place. And this one will hang around for most of the year, setting the terms of trade at Westminster and even possibly deciding the very future of Boris Johnson. The cost of living is about to shape our politics in a way that it hasn't for decades. You can see the build-up this week, from Keir Starmer's warning of a crisis to Tory backbenchers clamouring for Johnson to act now on higher fuel bills. And you can already see the misery in the stories about how Britons are now wrapping themselves up in blankets and turning on their hairdryers to keep warm rather than the central heating. Over the next few weeks, this crisis will only grow. On the 7th of February, the energy watchdog Ofgem set its new maximum price for energy bills. Utilities firm bosses are warning that the cap could easily go above £2,000, twice what it was last winter. And experts at the National Energy Action Charity have warned that fuel poverty could rise to its highest levels since John Major was in number 10, with about 6 million households having to choose between heating and eating, or paying the bus fare, or buying sanitary pads. This means that 2 million households, which as recently as last autumn were still keeping their heads above water, will sink when this new cap kicks in on the 1st of April. And just at the point, taxes will go up too. National insurance will rise, as will council tax for much of the country, alongside the stealth increase in income tax bills. Put that all together, and the Resolution Foundation warns that the average household stands to lose about over £1,200 a year. To this, we can add the effect of the higher petrol prices. These bills will pile up while wages and benefits are falling in real terms. It is a recipe for widespread deprivation and massive political turbulence. It will also blow apart the election coalition that has handed Johnson his landslide. In the True Blue, working only about 6% of households are in fuel poverty. But in Woking, by contrast, which went to the Tories in 2019, that population is nearly at 14%. My bet has been long that the boring old economics will inflict far more damage on Boris Johnson than the Baroque politics. Most critics of the Sun King have spent their days since the 2019 attacking his rule breaking, his brinkmanship with Brussels, his sheer bad behaviour. Until the revelation about his parties at number 10, hardly any of it landed with the public, and its wary will well be used to the political class trashing the norms to fill its books, just like the Right Honourable Member for Greensill Capital. But for all those voters, the left unmoved by the 42-point headlines and the straight-up op-eds are far more likely to be mobilised by the largest tax burden in over 70 years, swinging cuts to the frontline services and even surging inflation. No wonder the government can even barely quell its anxiety. The business secretary, Kirsty Katang, has been meeting energy bosses in a series of emergency summits. And thus, the last held on Wednesday, while the Chancellor Rishi Sunak's team has been grumbling to journalists about having to sum up for any of this. While only just about a month ago, before Ofgem announcement, no deal is on the table. What's odd is that Johnson himself has pledged one such remedy, co-writing an article in The Sun less than a month before the EU referendum in 2016. He vowed that Brexit would be an end to the VAT on fuel bills. We'll be able to scrap this unfair and damaging tax, Mr. Leave wrote. Isn't this right that the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels impose taxes on the poorest and elected British politicians can do nothing? A whole 2.5 years since becoming Prime Minister, he has done precisely nothing. This week, he squirmed on TV that cutting VAT was a blunt instrument and that wouldn't help directly towards those in most dire financial need. Fancy that. If only some had warned us that this guy reneges on a deal. But if Starmer wants to try and capitalize on this moment, he needs to do far better than making nothingy speeches laden with abstract nouns and back-ended with flags. Labour wants to scrap the 5% VAT rate on energy bills, but in truth, it's a very small change. It is £10 back on a £2 or £200 monthly bill. Better would be to call for a windfall tax on gas and oil companies, which have been making a killing as the fuel prices rise, and direct that money to the least well off. If Labour can take that position early and loud enough, they will reap the rewards when the Tories copy them. They can also point to the failures of the energy market, the collapse of at least 26 suppliers, and the consolidation of their customer base back into the hands of the big six, as a ground to try something new, to use the public sector to direct more investment into national and secure renewables. This is a generation of politicians that have never faced the inflation shock, but nevertheless are haunted by the mythology around what happened in the 1970s, with very good reason. Thatcher used that episode to finally dismantle the Keynesian welfare state and into exile the left for more than a decade. The right is already rehashing those very same old arguments about how inflation and higher tax rates must mean reduced public spending, and how taxpayers don't want to pay for green crap when reducing poverty. It is now essential that the left now counter those points now. This isn't the 1970s, and there is no danger of a wage price spiral. This is a workforce that has just emerged from the worst squeeze of living standards since Napoleon marched across Europe, and it is just about to enter another one. It is not the labour force that isn't working, it's the markets and the supply chain. Those are what now need to be fixed. So, as you can see, this is going to be a massive issue, and I do agree with those 2 points on that. I do massively agree with the 2 points that he brought up here, what Labour needs to do. Where were they? So yeah, scrapping the VAT is nothing. It really does mean nothing. It's basically £10 back on a £200 month bill. That's nothing. What would better be to do is to, again, windfall tax on the gas and oil companies, and then use that as a spending to help secure the most poor and in need. That's where it needs to go. And if Labour can get out early and out in front on that, that will be a massive victory for them. and again reshaping our energy market into something more national and funding renewable sources would be fantastic. But it's getting there. It's doing it, and again, Labour desperately need to think ambitiously about this. Now we've seen some good stuff come out very recently about what they want to do. I'm happy about that, slowly but surely. But Starmer really needs to lead the way on this. Really needs to take it away. And if he acts bold, he will guarantee. He will basically mop the floor with the Tories from now until the next general election. That's basically what happens. But he has to be bold about it. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.